quantifying that value up front. I mean, if you go in and they've agreed to the value you could bring them in the main areas why they're looking, it's going to be impossible for them to come back and say, oh yeah, we need a 40% reduction, especially if the return is 10 times the investment.
Coffee's for closers only.
So we've established my proposal is sound in principle. Now we're just haggling over price.
Let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
I mean, it's the same as Dunkin' Donuts. Costs 15 times the price.
Welcome to Impact Pricing, the podcast where we discuss pricing, value, and the calculated relationship between them. I'm Mark Stiving. Today our guest is Michael Farber, and here are 3 things you want to know about Mike before we start. He came highly recommended to me from a colleague, Mike Wilkinson. He's been in sales since the early 2000s. He is the founder of the ROI Shop. And okay, so this is 4, sorry. He started the ROI Shop without funding, without a paycheck for 3 years, and while paying for a wedding. Wow. Welcome, Mike.
Hey, how's it going, Mark? Thanks for having me.
I'm actually doing great today, but I'm really excited to talk to you because I often say things about ROI calculators that you probably don't agree with. And so I just would love to get this out on the table and have a conversation and learn more about how to think about them and how they make a ton of sense. So let me start with the easy question. I normally ask, how did you get into pricing, but you're really not. How did you get into this whole concept of ROI calculators?
Well, it actually happened during my time at Concur Technologies. It was about my second year there. They had their annual SKO. It was the second day of the annual meeting. And if everybody knows, the second day is the worst day to throw up anything boring at 8 in the morning. And that's exactly what they did. They threw up an Excel spreadsheet, and half the crowd was hungover because they got to see their friends, after a year. Anyway, they went through this Excel spreadsheet. After the first 2 tabs, everybody tuned out, and that was the end of that. About a month after SKO, I was working with Bacardi USA. It was a very big account for me. I was in the national space, but this was, right below enterprise level. So it was a very, very big deal for me. And I was working with their controller. His name was Warren. And he goes, Mike, I want to move forward with you, but we're going to need a business case. And I said, oh, shoot, Warren, no problem. We have one of those. I'll fly down a little early. We'll spend the morning. We'll build it together prior to the demo. He's like, all right, great. So it took me about 3 days to locate it after sending out massive emails. I finally got it, and it probably took me about another 4 or 5 days meddling with it just so I felt comfortable with it. So when I flew down to Bacardi, we sat down, we muddled through it together. And then at the end of the session, he goes, Mike, I got to tell you, this is one of the better tools I've seen. So I thought to myself, all right, I'm no schmuck here. Maybe I got a competitive advantage. I didn't like doing it. It wasn't fun for me. I never would have done it unless he asked. So really, this guy changed my life. Following that meeting, I started utilizing it in each and every opportunity. So after about 4 times, it completely changed the way I sold. And I'm like, wow, this is a really, really valuable tool. I shortly left Concur afterwards, went to a new company. They didn't have an ROI calculator. My best friend was going to build one, because he was a whiz in Excel. I went to the VP of sales and said, hey, can we build something like this? This is what I'm used to. He goes, yeah, sure. How much? And he was going to do it for free. I got my friend $3,000, but then it really got me thinking about, God, you got all these companies making 100 million in ARR and even more. They do not have a great way of talking about value. So that's really how it all started. Is I was forced to use it on one deal, and it changed the way I sold. And I realized there was a huge void in the marketplace.
Okay, so I absolutely love that story, by the way. And I think it almost sounds to me like I could replace the word ROI calculator with the word business case. Would you agree with that or not agree with that?
Yeah, I would say that. And I'm actually changing the name myself because I hate the word ROI calculator. Just like you said, you have negative feelings perhaps or ideas about it. And I think they're probably all right because ROI was done so terribly for so long that I like to call it a value calculator, because what we've created is much more than something you just plug in numbers and it spits out a number. There are discovery questions that automatically appear based on numbers or an output or things to ask a deeper question. So I do hate the term ROI calculator myself, because you get that pit in your stomach.
Oh man, if you'd have said the word value calculator to me earlier, I would have gotten even more excited.
Yeah. So I like value calculator in everything I say.
Nice, nice. So let's talk about the use of a ROI calculator. Let's call it a value calculator, and I'll feel even better.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the use of a value calculator for a second. I have lots and lots of thoughts or questions about it, but to begin with, different customers get value from different things. So let's say that I'm selling a single product, just to make life easy, and I could probably find 10 or 15 or 20 different places a customer of mine could make money or get value from my product. Is the idea to list all of these, is to find the one or two that matter to each individual customer, to find the top three and just use those for everybody? How do you think about this?
Great question, Mark. And it's something I always talk to with my prospects, because the key is it has to be simple to use, not only for your salesperson, but your champion, because they're the ones that have to go back and use it. So what I always suggest is don't try to boil the ocean and figure out all 15 areas that you can make or save your prospect money. Think about the low-hanging fruit, 4 or 5, the 80-20 rule. What do most of your prospects gravitate to, and build those and do a kick-ass job with those? Because the 8, 9, 10, 11 other use cases, that's not going to be why they buy your solution. There's probably 3 or 4 main reasons, and the other ones are nice to have. So I always suggest you're better off doing a kick-ass job on 3 or 4 than an okay job on 8.
Do you think it matters? I don't even know how to ask this question. It feels to me like I could have the exact same ROI situation with 2 different companies that measure it differently, think about it differently. And so if I have a single calculator, I'm not using their language, I'm using my language. Did I do that question justice?
I'm not exactly sure I follow. Are you trying to say if you're selling to 2 different types of verticals or industries and the language is different?
Sure, we could put it that way.
Yeah, that might mean 2 separate calculators. I'm not saying we're boiling it down and you have one calculator you're using for every opportunity. You might have 2 or 3 or 4 different templates, if you will. One for, fintech, healthcare, manufacturing. So you can select which template you'd want based on the vertical you're working with.
Yeah. So walk me through the approach that you expect or you would help a salesperson do when they're trying to get a potential buyer to fill out the ROI calculator with them. And I assume it's with them.
Yes. It's collaborative, and we have our own methodology on where and how to use it. When I first started the company, we'd build these calculators, give it to them and say, have at it. And that was an epic failure because salespeople hate to add anything in the sales process. We're stubborn as all heck, and to change the game is something we're not interested in. So we really started thinking about how we could increase adoption and where the value calculator should be put into the sales cycle. And the answer, like most things, was very, very obvious and easy. So if you think about the black hole in the sales cycle, for 80% of B2B SaaS companies who do demonstrations, the black hole in the sales cycle happens after the demo. That's where you start getting ghosted. You've got given you a demo mark. Now you're going to go back and talk to other folks perhaps, and then we never hear from you again. So that happens more often than not. So if you think about what happens with the buyer after a demo. So it's like if you go to a car dealership and you take a car for a test drive, there's not much else to do. And it's very similar to that with a demo. So if I give you a demo, the things that are going through your head after the demo are, can we afford it? Is it worth the time? Is it worth the investment? Is it worth the disruption? Is this even a priority? These are all financial thoughts, because if the ROI is huge, then the answer to those questions is yes. So what we suggest is you tag the ROI on to the end of a step everybody's already doing, which is the demo. And we do it in small chunks. So if I had a discovery call with you and one of your areas is reduced downtime, maybe you're a manufacturing company, and reduce downtime, increase productivity, those reduce inventory. Maybe those are your 3 value areas that we identified. At the end of the demo, I build out one section with you. Mark, thanks so much for watching the demo. You said you were interested in reducing downtime. Let's build out this one value bucket together. So now you leave the demo thinking about a financial number rather than an admin tool or some obscure report. And then we set up a follow-up call to build out the other 2 areas that were of interest. So we're actually helping you in the buying process. Most salespeople let go of the buyer's hand after the demo, and a lot of buyers don't know how to buy. That was a long-winded answer, but hopefully that helped.
No, I think that was a great answer. What I try to help salespeople with, and I talk about a lot, is something called a value conversation.
Yes.
And when I think of a value conversation, I think it's very similar to what you're describing, except my expectation isn't that I've handed you a calculator or an Excel spreadsheet or a tool that says, here, stick in their numbers and out pops the return or the value or the dollar. Instead, it's walk them through the calculations so they can calculate the value themselves. And now they believe it more than if I told them, hey, you're going to go make $1 million.
Yeah. 95% of all salespeople will say, oh, we can increase revenue 3x, or we'll increase productivity by 40%. What the hell does that even mean? These are just 1,000-foot level ROI metrics you're throwing against the wall. But when you build it with them, it's a collaborative approach. And then they feel confident enough to go back and sell it internally. They're the ones that have to use it internally.
Yeah. So let me try that. Let me try that again, though, because what I'm not talking about is, look, I'm in pricing, and in pricing systems, we usually say, look, as soon as you touch a pricing system, you're going to probably make 1 to 5% of your revenue in additional profit, right? Which is a huge number, and it's like a no-brainer, but there's no support or justification behind that number.
Correct.
But as soon as I take it down to a value calculator, and I say, look, you are bidding against yourself when you make 3 different bids in 3 different channels to the same customer, and they are smartly choosing the lowest price bid you gave them because you bid against yourself. You're giving up this much money. You do it this many times a year. Here's how much money you're giving up. So therefore, this is how much money you're about to go make when you solve this problem.
Yes.
Now, the difference is I don't go in and say, look, you're going to save 1 to 5%. It's, hey, look at how much money we can make, or better yet, it's how many times do we do this? Let's go through the data and look to see what actually happens here, and what's it costing you? And then if we do that, and the customer says, yeah, I get it. Now that's $1 million problem.
Yep.
They really believe it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And walking them through, people aren't necessarily good with math. Most people aren't good with math or numbers. But going through that step-by-step process, when they see that number and they understand it, absolutely. It's like writing down. They see it, they say it out loud, it means something, like a goal. I'm going to lose 10 pounds. It's in my head, that's easy enough, but they say, write it down, look at it, read it. It means more psychologically. So going through the exercise, it's the same type of thing. Yeah,
I write down that I got to lose 10 pounds, and I've gotten really good at ignoring it. So it's okay. So another big issue that I see with ROI calculators, value calculators, is there's a concept that I teach a lot called will I and which one. And what this concept essentially means is that most buyers go through 2 different decision processes or decisions when they make a purchase. First one is, am I going to buy something in the product category? And so the value of that is, what's the value of solving the problem? Then if I say, yes, I want to go solve the problem, now it's, okay, which one am I going to go buy? And now it's, what's the value of your solution relative to the competitive alternatives? So how do you think about that when you think about creating a value calculator?
Well, the thing, why it's even more important today is there's typically between 8 and 12 people involved in a decision process today. And one of those people is going to have an ROI or value checkbox that you're going to have to check. So, you're eliminating that. You might be emotionally invested in this solution, but now you have to get the other 8, 9, or 10 people emotionally invested, and they're probably not going to be. They're going to do it rationally, and rationally, companies buy for two reasons. You're going to make them money or save them money. That's really it at the end of the day. So it's even more important to do it. But, you know, when a company sits down or the rep sits down and does a good job of walking their prospect through it, it separates them from the other sellers. The other sellers aren't doing it. They seem buttoned up. They're helping the champion more. And, you know, I know you're into pricing. It's going to allow them to hold firm on their pricing. So when they go through this step and they've uncovered all these areas of value and you get them to buy into it, at the end, it's going to be very difficult for them to say, oh, we want a 30% discount. So it builds credibility to you. It also builds confidence as a salesperson. When you realize what you're providing does provide value, you're going to hold firm on your pricing naturally.
Yeah. So I'm going to say what I think I heard you say, and I don't disagree with it at all. And that is, we provide the value calculator for the will I part. So what's the value of solving the problem?
Yep.
And so few people do that just providing that piece makes you stand alone. It gets rid of I'm not sure I want to make a decision now. So it makes the purchase happen more often. And so I think that in and of itself is a wonderful thing. The piece that I was curious about is okay, so now I'm up against that competitor. Here are the three things that differentiate us from that competitor. What's the value of those three things to this customer? And I get it that that's much, much harder. And so few people do the will I value that it probably is okay to not do the which one value.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense to you.
Yeah, I think so. I think it does. I don't know really how to answer it. Understanding the will I type questions, we could build those into the calculator. Like I said, what we build is more than just how many employees do you have? What is their average salary? How many hours does it take type thing? We build interactive discovery questions in it. So based on a certain answer or a drop down, we can drive another discovery question. And then based on that discovery question, we can start to quantify a different area.
Yeah. Okay, cool. One of the things you brought up, and I'm so curious because I don't have a great answer for this. You said, look, there's two places where companies make money from us, and there's actually three, right? We either make them more money, we save them more money, or we reduce their risk. And I seem to be involved in way too many companies lately that are focused on risk reduction. So think about a security company, right? How do you, as a value calculator, help a company put value on risk reduction? It's
funny. I was right before our call. I was building a security value calculator, and it's like insurance. You know, it's a very tough sale for a security company because you're doing it based on fear. If you've never had a breach, it's like, all right, I don't need this today. I'm working on this priority, which is more important. But once again, what separates us from Excel, you picture Excel, it's ugly. It's, grids and lines and numbers. If you think about our interactive value calculator, it's like its own website portal. So we stir emotion with visuals and videos and stories. And, we just had our graphic designer put together two jars. One was IT or security budget before a breach, and it only had a couple pennies in the bottom. And then the jar next to it was security budget after a breach, and it was overflowing with change. So you got to stir that kind of emotion and fear when it comes to breaches and ransomware attacks. So that's how we do it, with more storytelling than actual numbers. But we can quantify what a breach costs, how much is a ransomware, how many days are you typically down due to ransomware? And here's your risk exposure, so we get them in that kind of fear mode.
Yeah, in the end, it comes down to, we get the cost part. What's the probability of that happening? And does the buyer believe it? And right, so it's all those fascinating issues.
Yeah.
Gosh. Yeah. Mike, this has just been an absolute blast. I've been enjoying this to no end. If you were going to offer a piece of pricing advice, because this is the question I always end on, what's one piece of pricing advice you would give our listeners that you think could have a big impact on their business?
I'm not going to toot my own horn, but it is, quantifying that value up front. I mean, if you go in and they've agreed to the value you could bring them in the main areas why they're looking, it's going to be impossible for them to come back and say, oh yeah, we need a 40% reduction, especially if the return is, 10 times the investment. So I think you could definitely hold firm. I will tell you, I have not discounted our price in our last 7 deals, not one penny. And we've more than doubled our price since a year ago. So it really does, they got to see the value, and then it's hard for them to ask for a discount.
Do you help your clients go through your own value calculator for themselves?
Absolutely. It's part of my sales process. So they experience it firsthand, what it's like to use it and how impactful it is. And then I'm like, is this how you want your salespeople to sell? Because this wasn't a budgeted project. You have to go back and get budget. You have to sell this internally. These are the hurdles that your reps have to overcome. Was this more effective than just showing up and giving you a demo? So they experience it firsthand. We eat our own caviar over here.
Nice. That was absolutely brilliant. And I like the caviar comment too. Mike, we're going to have to wrap up, but thank you very much for your time today. If anybody wants to contact you, how can they do that?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn under Michael Farber, or search for the ROI Shop. Don't forget the in front of it. It's funny, ROI Shop was taken when I went to go get my domain. And then I reached out to him. The guy wanted $95,000 to get ROI Shop. I said, I'll throw the in it. I'm Jewish and cheap, so that wasn't going to work.
Nice. Thank you, Mike. Episode 133 is all done. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, would you please leave us a rating and a review? And if you have any questions or comments about the podcast or pricing in general, feel free to email me, mark@impactpricing.com. Now, go make an impact.